Our speaker today, you know, when they say the speaker needs no introduction, that's almost true today. But our speaker today, I'm going to introduce him anyway, is our president, Clyde Romero, who's going to talk to us on the Osama bin Laden. And Clyde has a wealth of knowledge. We all love hearing from him. And I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to him. Clyde?
Thank you very much for the introduction. The briefing you're about to receive is not all encompassing whatsoever. If you can bring it all the way down, you get an idea how dark it was. It was actually darker than this when these guys got off the helicopter. But we can leave it this way. So the briefing you're about to receive is not all encompassing by any means. This small but important portion covers the initial planning and the execution of the plan. It also covers what is believed the helicopter that was used in the raid. If you are truly interested in the events leading up to how it was accomplished, I encourage you to read the books that are shown in the presentation. These books were the ones that the colonel, about a year ago, we had the colonel that actually was in charge of the whole operation brief us, but he didn't have a PowerPoint, who gave the presentation to AVVBA, and he was the one who told me, Clyde, these are the books that you want to read about this presentation. There are portions of this briefing that contain pictures of sites that many individuals have never seen. Everything in this briefing was taken from the books I read and the internet and personal interviews by individuals that were involved in the raid. As a side note, I've been to both of the sites that have been presented in this, and that's all I'm going to say about that. It's my wish that you enjoy the briefing. So this is what it looked like when the guys from the 160th landed at Abbottabad in Pakistan. The mission was kill, capture Osama bin Laden. How many people have seen the movie Zero Dark 30? So if you saw that movie Zero Dark 30, they really didn't know if Osama was there, but they had a good idea he was going to be there. And they decided to say, let's put this together and let's do it. These are the 4 books that the colonel that talked to us about a year ago said, Clyde, read these books, and everything in there is borderline classified. And I read those books, every one of them, twice. And they're very, very important, and it gives the reader a mindset on how they put together this plan and how it was presented to the president at that time and the Secretary of Defense to put together the kill-capture raid. Operation Neptune Spear. On May 1 at 10:30 local time, the team took off from Jalalabad, Afghanistan, and headed for the compound in 2 stealth-equipped UH-60s Blackhawks. The 2 helicopters included 23 SEALs, an interpreter, a combat dog, brought along in case bin Laden hidden in the compound. The operation was given codename Neptune Spear. Neptune was the Roman variant of the Greek water god Poseidon, and his spear was the trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs. As the operators descended into the compound, one of the specialty-equipped Blackhawks lost control because of the high walls presented different air conditions than the chain link fence that the team had trained on. We'll talk about that later. The pilot was able to maintain some control, but the tail hit the walls surrounding the compound and forced the helicopter to make a soft crash landing. Remember, this was all done at night, and this was all done with night vision goggles. The raid was approved by the American President Barack Obama and involved 24 Navy SEALs. And the reason why they used Navy SEALs, the Navy SEALs happened to be in theater at the time where the Delta Force were back in the States. It wasn't that Delta Force wasn't ready, it's just Delta Force was taking a break and the Navy SEALs was in theater. In 2 Blackhawks. Operation Neptune Spear was launched from about 120 miles away near the Afghan city of Jalalabad. The raid took 40 minutes, and bin Laden was killed shortly before 1 a.m. Pakistan Standard Time. 3 other men, including one of bin Laden's son, a woman, in the compound were also killed. After the raid, the operatives returned to Afghanistan with bin Laden's course for identification and then flew over 850 miles to the Arabian Sea, where he was buried in accordance with Islamic tradition. The raid took 38 minutes. So the compound is off to the left, and off to the right is the satellite view of the compound. We built an exact version of that compound, and you'll get a chance to see where we bid. The only thing we didn't build when we made the compound, we used a chain link fence instead of using walls, and that caused the helicopter, for my helicopter pilots, where are you guys at? Let me see your hands. They got into settling with power. And settling with power in a helicopter is a death knell, especially at night and when heavy and hot. So the plan was one helicopter lands on the roof and the other helicopter lands in the courtyard. And the one that landed in the courtyard got settling with power, and that's the one you see where the helicopter tail hits the compound wall, and you'll see a picture of that shortly. So that's Area 51, and that's where they built the compound at. That's in the middle of the Nellis Desert out there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Area 51 is also where the SR-71 came out of, also where the U-2 came out of, and a lot of other black programs. This is the TTR, that's the Tonopah Test Range. That's also in the Nevada desert. That's the home of the F-117 stealth fighter and a couple of other black programs. So you can see right here, Area 51 and Tonopah Test Range. And so to make this very realistic, everything was done at night, and they practiced coming out of the TTR into Area 51 and back, because that was about the same range as that they were going to use when they were going to go into the area in Pakistan. When the National Security Council met on April 19th, Obama gave provisional approval for the helicopter raid. Worried that the plan for dealing with the Pakistanis was too uncertain, Obama asked Admiral McCraven to equip the team to fight its way out if necessary. And this was extremely important because at one time, we were going to talk about telling the Pakistanis we were coming, but we knew there was too many leaks in their intelligence, so they said, no, we're not going to tell them we're coming in. So we were basically breaking sovereign airspace without their country's okay, and if something went south, which it subsequently did go south, they wanted to make sure that our guys could fight their way out. And you can see out in the subsequent slides what we used to make sure that happened. The Chinooks on standby were on the ground in the desert, roughly 2/3 away from Jalalabad, with 2 additional SEAL teams consisting of 24 SEAL operators for a quick reaction force. They were just on the other side of the Pakistani border, ready to come in if they had to fight their way out. The Chinooks were equipped with Gatling guns, 50 caliber machine guns, extra fuels for the Black Hawk. These guys were loaded for bear. They were ready to come in and extract the team if it needed to be and get them out of Dodge. The mission was to interdict any Pakistan military attempts to interfere with the raid. Other Chinooks holding 25 more SEALs were stationed just across the border in Afghanistan in case reinforcements were needed during the operation. This was unprecedented because usually when you go in with an operation like this, you don't go in with a big footprint. But the president wanted to make sure if something went bad, our guys were not going to get captured and be made POWs. So this is the basic plan. They were coming out of Jalalabad with the Chinooks at the forward air refueling point on this side of Afghanistan. The Black Hawks were going to go right into Abbottabad and land like I showed you in the picture. And here's the really crazy part. Abbottabad was just south of the Kakul Military Academy, which is the Pakistani version of West Point. So It's believed that the Pakistani high-ups knew exactly where he was staying, but they didn't want to say anything because they were too embarrassed. This is the picture that everybody sees of the situation. Sorry about that. This is the picture of the situation room when the helicopter gets into settling with power and hits the wall. And you got to say, well, Clyde, how did they know all this was happening real time? So you see that drone up there, the RQ-170 drone? That's the most advanced drone we have. It's a stealth drone. And it was actually just recently used when we went into Venezuela. We don't see much use of that drone because it's very important. I gave a briefing on that drone earlier, and that's the close-up of it. And that drone gave real-time live imagery to the people in the situation room when that helicopter got into settling with power and crashed. And everybody was really worried about that because they remember Desert One in April of 1980 when the helicopters hit the C-130, and we all know what that turned into. And going back to this picture, Gates and Biden gave the president at that time a thumbs down on this operation because they all had tribal knowledge about what happened in April of 1980. But the President Obama said, nope, I feel good about this. We've got enough people in place. I'm going to get my people out, and we're going to go. So they went. They got them, and this is the rest of the story. The material seized from the compound contained al-Qaeda's strategy for Afghanistan after America's withdrawal from the country in 2014, as well as thousands of electronic memos and missives that captured conversations between bin Laden and his deputies from around the world. Evidence seized from the compound said to include 10 cell phones, 5 to 10 computers, 12 hard drives, and at least 100 computer disks, including thumb drives and DVDs, handwritten notes, documents, weapons, and assortment of personnel items. This was described in a senior Pentagon intelligence official as the single largest collection of senior terrorist materials ever. On November 1st, 2017, the CIA released to the public approximately 470,000 files and a copy of bin Laden's diary. Intelligence analysts also studied call detail records from the 2 phone numbers that were found sewn into bin Laden's clothing. They helped, over the course of several months, apprehend several al-Qaeda members in several countries to kill several of bin Laden's closest associates by CIA drone strikes. This just depicts after the body was taken out of Pakistan to Jalalabad, and if you read the book, none of the SEALs had a tape measure, and bin Laden was a tall guy, so they had a SEAL basically lay down that was about the same height and say, is this the guy? This is the guy. And the SEAL that laid down by him, he later was given a tape measure by General McCabe saying, here, you need this for the next operation. So going back there, you could see that from Jalalabad, they brought the body back there, and then they flew it right to the Carl Vinson, where the body was flown to this carrier, and it was disposed of as per Islamic law. And the reason why they didn't bury the body anywhere is they didn't want that to be a shrine for the al-Qaeda people. So they buried it at sea. That was the reason why they did that. So everybody here, well, not everybody, but most of the people who flew, whether it's civilians or military, wants to know about this damn helicopter because it was a unique piece involved in this raid. So helicopter stealth technology isn't new. The RAH-60 Comanche was the follow-on to the OH-58, and it was supposed to be used in the event we had a Cold War. It was built by Sikorsky, and Sikorsky builds the best helicopters in the world, bar none. And they had several prototypes. It was stealth, it was very expensive, and then somewhere along the line, the Army said they didn't want it. However, this is more about the Comanche. As intended, it would have functioned as a stealth helicopter incorporating a number of different techniques and technologies in order to reduce the radar cross-section, along with other areas of visibility and detectability. The exterior surfaces of the RAH-66 were faceted and covered with radar-absorbent material, coatings, and infrared suppression paint. As a result, these combined measures, the Comanche's RCS was stated to be 360 times smaller than of the Apache. The acoustic signature of the helicopter was also reported to be noticeably lower than of comparable helicopters. This reduction had been partially achieved through the adoption of all composite 5-blade main rotor blade and the pioneering of a canted tail rotor assembly. That's a lot for somebody who doesn't know anything about helicopter technology, but most people, even right now, when we're outside, you can hear a helicopter before you can see it. And the big thing behind that was we have to knock down the acoustics. So this is not exactly the helicopter that did the raid, but this was one of the helicopters that was put out there to practice flying the ones that did the raid. Okay, it was called the Stealth Hawk. The picture isn't classified. It's not an easy picture to get, but this is what that helicopter basically looked like. It was basically a UH-60. And the bottom one is what the Nighthawks always fly. That's the one you saw in Black Hawk Down. And the one on above is the very closest that we believe what the Nighthawk looked like. It's estimated to cost $60 million. And they made probably 4 of them. We probably think they made a little bit more than 4, but everybody I've talked to, they said, yeah, they probably made about 4 of them, and that's all anybody wants to talk about it. You probably will never see a Stealth Hawk at an air show. You probably will never see a Stealth Hawk anywhere because it's so classified because of what that helicopter pulled off. So let's talk about the crash and what was recovered. The tail section of the secret helicopter survived the demolition and laid just outside the compound. Pakistani security forces put up a cloth barrier at first light to hide the wreckage. Later, a tractor hauled it away under a tarp. Journalists obtained these photographs that revealed previously undisclosed stealth technology. Aviation Week, as those of us in the military call it aviation leak, said that the helicopter appeared to be significantly modified of a Black Hawk. That's an understatement. The modified Black Hawk was the first confirmed operational stealth helicopter. It is likely that most of the valuable information obtainable from the wreckage was the composition of the radar-absorbing paint that was used on the tail section. And that's the tail section right there. So the Pakistanis, if you don't know anything about Pakistanis, they're in bed very much with the Chinese. They get a lot of their technology from the Chinese. However, the Pakistanis play both sides of the fence. All their Air Force airplanes and all their helicopters, guess where they come from? Good old USA. Their F-16s, their Black Hawks, and all that. So we didn't want them, the Chinese were very much interested in this. Serial numbers found at the scene were consistent with a MH-60 built in 2009. Its performance during the operation confirmed that a stealth helicopter could evade detection in a military-sensitive, densely populated area. Photos show that the Black Hawk tail had stealth-figured shapes, and the boom and the fairings and the swept stabilizer and a hubcap over the noise-reducing 5 or 6 blade tail rotor. It appears to have a silver-loaded infrared suppressor finish, similar to some of the V-22 Ospreys. The crash of the Black Hawk may have been in least part caused by the aerodynamic deficiencies introduced to the airframe by the stealth technology and add-ons, and an unrelated possible cause of the crash was that the rehearsal mock-up of the compound had used a chain link fence rather than a solid wall for the perimeter, and thus not had reproduced the airflows that the helicopter would face, i.e. settling with power. So going back to that, so the Chinese had contacted, and we know this, had contacted Pakistanis and said, you know, we want that tail rotor. And that's when it got a little sticky for the State Department. So Senator Kerry at the time had a very good relationship with the Pakistani military. And he went in on the behalf of the United States and recovered that tail boom, and it never got into the hands of the Chinese. But it was very close to ending up in the hands of the Chinese, because the Chinese wanted some of that information on that tail boom, because like I said, everybody really wants to see that helicopter, and that's the biggest piece that they've ever seen. Because when that helicopter crashed in the compound, the SEALs blew it up in place. They put thermite grenades in it, and they basically burnt it to the ground. But they didn't have enough time to go outside the compound and do what they had to do, because they were only on the ground for 38 minutes, and then they had to bring in a Chinook to recover the helicopter, the SEAL teams that was on the ground, and get them out of there. So they didn't really have, and this is all done at night, remember, with night vision goggles. So they didn't have enough time to do the complete demolition. Turn the lights up, Ed, please. So at this time, I will take some questions, and if you lead me into something that's classified, I'll tell you right now what I'm going to tell you. You've asked a question outside the scope of this briefing. Go ahead.
Was the Chinook,
You need a microphone.
did the Chinook land outside the area?
Yes, the Chinook, like I said, the two Chinooks that were at the FARP, the forward operating plant, as soon as the helicopter crashed, they were alerted that something was wrong, and the helicopter, everybody that was at the FARP stayed engines running, because what they didn't want to have happen was, and if anybody's ever been around helicopters, when you need one to start, it won't. And so this is at night, and they were at a forward operating refueling point, so everything was left running. They had brought extra fuel in, because they were worried about running out of fuel, because that was another thing. They were worried about running out of fuel. Also, when it comes to the stealth helicopter, when you read the book, there was a toss-up. Most of the guys in the 160th who did the raid, they said, why are we using this thing? Because they really hadn't practiced with it. They only made 4 or 5 of them, and nobody's ever seen it. But they wanted to have a proof of concept. They said, we've spent all this money on this thing, let's try to use it on this raid. So when they used it, it was almost like an aha moment. We thought, we told you so. But the moment was that they didn't build the compound, the practice compound, like the real compound, and so they ran into settling with power. And that caught them. You know, that really caught them. Questions over here.
Clyde, you said that the stealth helicopters went in. There were 2 of them.
Two stealth helicopters.
Right, the 2 stealth helicopters.
How far behind those helicopters were the Chinooks? Because they weren't stealth.
No, the 2, they were at just on the other side of the border. They were in Afghanistan.
So they were 20 or 30 minutes out.
Yeah, about that much. As soon as that helicopter crashed, they got up in the air. They got up because they knew they had to haul ass to go and do that. At that time, when that helicopter crashed, stealth and surprise was over with. It was over with. In fact, if you read the book, when the helicopter crashed, it made a whole lot of noise. And so they had 2 guys that spoke Urdu. That's the language of Pakistanis that on it. And they went outside the wall, and people were saying, what's all this noise about? And they were able to basically calm everybody down. And they said, this is nothing but a Pakistani military operation, because everybody knew the Pakistani version of West Point was just up the street. So they were able to convince everybody, oh no, this is Pakistani operation, the whole 9 yards. They got away with that. They got away with that very luckily. En route are the 2 Chinooks, not 1, but 2 Chinooks to pick up the SEALs that are down there with the bodies and all that and get them out of there, and they landed on the street. They couldn't land inside the compound because the compound was full of a burnt stealth helicopter, and they couldn't land on the roof. The good helicopter, stealth helicopter, he get the hell out of there. He left. He said his #1 job is to get his team out and the other guys get in there. Any more? Go ahead.
My son spent 15 years in the 160th in the 1st Battalion. The A company of the 1st Battalion is the one that has the DAP birds, the specially equipped Blackhawks. And the talk was amongst the unit was that the guy flying the one that got the settling with power was a developmental type guy. He wasn't one of the A company normal line pilots. And they were all convinced that had it been one of those guys, that wouldn't have happened. No.
If you say so.
That's what they said.
The payload of the Chinook would have been able to carry 30 or 40 SEALs, whereas the stealth helicopter only had 12. Why did they send 2 Chinooks when one would have been more than?
I'm not understanding.
He's saying the Chinook would carry twice as many people, so why did they send 2?
Well, because you can't make a Chinook stealth. You can't. It's too big. If you've ever, all right. So you can go. You can see the. If you ever go to Hunter Army Airfield, the 160th has a detachment there. There's 3 detachments of the 160th. One of them is at Hunter Army Airfield. The other one is at Joint Base McCord, and the training one is at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And the helicopters that they fly normally in every raid are out there, or some of them are inside the hangar. But you can go to the hangar. You can't stealth a Chinook. It's impossible.
I'm just saying why there were 2 when only 1 would have been plenty enough.
Why would he send 2 if they're only 1? If 1 would carry enough, why send 2?
Well, because if you know anything about a Chinook, and there's probably a couple of Chinook pilots in here, it's not exactly one of the most reliable helicopters in this type of operation. Helicopters have a lot of issues. In fact, the 2 stealth helicopters that they sent in there, they weighed everybody down to 1 pound. That because it was temperature limited, and they had to weigh everybody on a scale before they got into the helicopter. And they did this on every mission when they were practicing, because the stealth helicopter didn't have any bigger engines. It had the standard engines, well, a little bit better engines than a normal Black Hawk, but they were dealing with so much of the, if you take a look at this picture, look at that helicopter. There's nothing aerodynamic about that thing. That's like a boxcar, okay? All right? So it's not smooth or anything like that. So it took more power for that helicopter to fly than a normal Black Hawk. That coupled with all the gear that SEALs had, so they were always power limited, So, all right? And a Chinook on a good day, you can hear them coming. And not only that, if you look at the 160th Chinooks, the engines, they have huge IR suppressors. That's infrared suppressors to suppress the shoulder-fired missiles. And even then, and I'm an IR subject matter expert, even then they know that they're hanging it out. Where the Black Hawk was absolutely designed, when initially from the paper, when it was designed to defeat the SA-7, which is the most prevalent shoulder-fired missile out there, right off the bat.
Given the satellite imagery of the compound, was it a known decision to not mock up in Area 51 the mock-up compound with chain link versus hard wall? What was the background thought on that?
Why did they pick Area 51?
No. We had a chain link fence in Area 51. The compound had a hard wall. The hard wall did cause some problems. Did they consciously not make a hard wall in Area 51 versus a chain link fence?
They probably did it just It was quickly. It was probably just it's probably just a field expedient measure to get it done. And in retrospect, they should have done it exactly like the compound, but I don't think anybody thought past that it was going to be an issue until it became an issue. And anybody who's ever been around helicopter flying, we know that. You know, everything is great until it isn't. You know, well, it's the truth. It's the truth. Helicopters are soft targets. This is from a guy who's been shot down several times, okay? So they're soft targets. And so you can plan everything to the nines, and it just takes one thing to happen. But in retrospect, the SEALs are always planned for that. That's why when that happened, it didn't end the mission. It didn't end up like Desert One. These guys said, well, if this helicopter crashes, or if this helicopter has an issue, no big deal. We got Plan Bravo, and Plan Bravo was just right across the fence. The guys in the Chinook already coming in the air, coming to get him out. So they had planned for that. They had planned for something to go wrong. Okay, Alan.
If they did all the simulation and mock-up and all that in Area 51, how did they justify using the SEALs instead of Delta Force? Simply because the SEALs are already in theater.
Didn't understand your question.
They did all this mock-up and rehearsal and all that in Area 51. Did they do that with the actual SEALs that completed the mission?
Yeah, they did everything.
Well, then how did they decide to use the SEALs instead of Delta Force? Because the SEALs were already in theater.
Yes, because, right, the SEALs were already in Afghanistan where the Delta Force was in the States.
So they brought the SEALs home to rehearse and took them back, and that didn't make any sense.
Well, that's what they did, because the Delta Force guys were pissed off. The Delta guys were pissed off, but who ran the operation? Admiral McCraven. And last time I checked, he was Navy.
The other is a bullshit story.
Don't look at me, I'm just a messenger. Well, thank you very much for listening.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
I got a question and a comment.
Go ahead.
Question is, who was the senator that salvaged the tail boom? Was somebody named Kerry?
Who was the what?
We talking about John Kerry?
John Kerry,
Hallelujah. Okay, that makes sense. All right, my comment is this. The Chinook is so unreliable, it has now become the C-130 of the Army Aviation Fleet.
Oh, absolutely. No, yeah. Yeah. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing that at all. It just makes a hell of a lot of noise. You know that. You flew it.
Well, and it's still in use and will be for many years. Well, we'll all be gone and it'll still be flying in Army aviation.
I have a question about stealth technology.
A question about stealth technology?
So when you look at this helicopter up here.
Right.
Talking to the mic.
I'm trying.
Rick, go back.
I have a question about stealth technology. So you see all the IR reduction.
Right.
But how do you quiet the rotor?
Well, you quiet the
How do
rotor.
you make the rotors quiet? Couldn't they hear them coming? Whoop, 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 whoop.
You quiet the rotor. You quiet the rotor a couple of ways. You can quiet the rotor by changing the RPMs of the rotor, all right? And then also the blades. All right, everybody here that were in Vietnam remember the UH-1. You could hear the UH, wop, 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 wop. Some of you here that live in the Atlanta area, out of Dobbins, there's a Black Hawk unit that flies. You don't hear the Black Hawk until it's almost on you, okay? Because they did that because if you look at the Black Hawk blade, it comes out straight, but the tips are canted back. The tips are canted back because the wop, wop, wop that you hear on a UH-1 is the rotor blade approaching, quote, the speed of sound. Because the airplane is moving, the helicopter is moving forward, the forward blade is approaching the speed of sound, and that's the speed you hear. Where with the Black Hawk, you don't have to move the rotor blades that quick because the blade chord is wider, and then the tip of the blade is where you actually get the noise. They canted it back. So it's left, so you do that and then you change the blade. You change the blade. That's why that helicopter costs so much, because they did a lot of testing with that blade. Those blades are not blades that just go to Home Depot and say, I'll take 2 of them. That's not the way that works.
We've got more blades. A greater number of blades.
One more.
Can you do us a big favor? Can you send on the can you send on the website those books that you showed?
Can you put the books
I think
titles on the website?
Correct.
John Bird, can you answer that?
It's going to be in the video, right? And you're going to have the slides.
John says it'll be in the video, you'll be able to, which will be published.
Okay.
But another thing we could do, I guess, is send it out as an email.
Is that it?
Yeah,
We'll
that.
send it out on an email.
We'll do that.
Well, thank you for listening. I'm out of here.
Wait a
No,
minute,
you're not
before you're
in.
out of here. Any other questions?
You got USO rifle?
Thank you, Clyde.
Oh,